Kacie is a registered nurse turned deaf doula, educator and founder of Deaf Doula School. After more than a decade in end-of-life nursing, she left healthcare to create a better way of supporting people at the end of life. Today, she trains the next generation of deaf doulas worldwide, speaks at conferences and hospitals about transforming end-of-life care, and uses her platform to change how we think and talk about death. Welcome, Kacie. So glad you could join us today. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. It's a really exciting topic that we're going to go over.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. So I understand you're a deaf doula and also a deaf educator. Do you still do nursing?
I still hold my nursing license, but currently I'm only working as a death doula and a death educator.
Okay, perfect. So with end of life doula, I understand it is definitely a calling. I would never thought that I'd be going down this path, but um, for me, deaf doula came at the beginning of this year, and I had a near death experience 2010, and last year Spirit was kind of asking me to start talking about it and sharing my experience. And this year, at the beginning of the year, it was like, okay, let's take all your skills from the past and let's just bring this all into being a deaf doula and providing services to help people. So that's kind of where I'm at with the role and my understanding. And so, with that, I'm glad to have you on the channel and sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and for also the viewers who are here and seeing it today.
Glad to be here at the beginning of your journey and to share any wisdom that I have that can help you or anybody who's listening.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it. Now, how did your calling come to call you to being a deaf doula?
So I'm actually a registered nurse, as we kind of mentioned, and I worked in the field for over a decade. And this is kind of where I found my calling. I've always been drawn to death, even as a kid. I always loved kind of being in the cemetery and even working or being around elderly when I was a kid. I was just kind of always drawn to that. A lot of times, kids. Are more fearful of being in hospitals or whatever, but I had grandparents and aunts and uncles who were in long-term care facilities, and I was just drawn to being around them and spending time with them. They loved it when I would spend time with them, and so I loved kind of giving them that happiness. So anyways, I went into nursing, and in nursing I worked in long-term care, acute care, skilled care. So I worked with people who were at or nearing the end of their life, and I saw a lot of death. I also worked the front lines of COVID, and so I saw a ton of death during the front lines of COVID. And throughout my whole entire nursing career, I just saw that, death is often just kind of done wrong. Things go wrong all the time, but for silly little reasons, like there just wasn't enough support or there just wasn't enough education. If they just would have had a little bit more support or a little bit more education about this or that beforehand, then things wouldn't have gone wrong or things wouldn't have gone, wonky, if you will. And so, after experiencing this so many times in the nursing role, it was like I really, really wish that there was somebody else who could support them in a different way than I could as a nurse, or in a different way than hospice could. I didn't work for hospice as a nurse, but I worked in long term care. And the way that long term care nurses work with hospice nurses is that we work alongside them, almost in a way that death doulas work alongside hospice nurses. So I kind of got used to working alongside hospice in this way, but in a nursing role. And so I was able to kind of see, like, there needed to be something else. There needed to be something else there to support people in another way. The way hospice supports people through death is amazing and incredible and absolutely necessary, but there just needed to be a little bit something else. Something was missing. Um, After working the front lines of COVID and seeing so many people die, those tragic deaths where their family members weren't allowed to be by their side because facilities were shut down and people weren't allowed to come in. This is where my calling was almost screaming at me at this point, like, listen, I've been quietly whispering in your ear for years now, this is it. Because during COVID, there was a million things that I was supposed to be doing as a nurse. I mean, I had a list a million miles long, but the only thing that I could focus on was helping people die better, holding their hand and making sure that they knew that they weren't alone because there was nobody else to do that. You couldn't get hospice in to help people die because people were dying so fast that there wasn't enough hospice nurses in the world to get there to help them die, and their family members couldn't be there, and so literally people were dying alone and scared, and there wasn't even enough nursing staff in the facility to sit with everybody that was dying. And so this became something that I felt incredibly drawn to. I need to go help these people. I need to hold their hand. I need to make sure that they know that they're not alone. The only problem was that that's not what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be doing nurse stuff. I had a million other things I was supposed to be doing, but that's where my calling was screaming at me. Maybe you aren't meant to be a nurse. Maybe you're meant for something more. Maybe you're meant for something different. And so that is where things turned around for me. And I did exit the world of nursing to find something else, to find, this calling of mine. I had actually never heard of a death doula, even as a nurse. I had never heard of that role before. So when I left nursing, I actually, had to search for what could this be? What could this be called that I'm looking for? And when I found, death doula, end of life doula, and when I found what we do, we help people to labor out of this world safely and comfortably. It was like, this is it. This is what I've always been thinking about or talking about to myself. There has to be something else there. This is exactly what it is. This is exactly what people need at the end of life. And this is what I'm meant to do. And I went down that road and I absolutely never turned back.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and that was tragic. Like I was seeing things on the news and everything, and people were upset and they were being told to do certain things, and it was just like chaos. It looked like from social media on that whole, situation. Um, was there any, because I know a lot of people who were nurses and things like that. Was there any things that you could say about that as far as, maybe I know you say they were wanting you to do certain things, but you were doing others. Did you see anything in that time that didn't really resonate with you as far as your nursing role?
Yeah, yeah. So nursing and I had started to misalign before COVID already. Healthcare, it's no surprise to most people, especially probably most people listening here, that, it's a lot about the money and they put money over people. And that had already become apparent to me before COVID. But right in COVID, a lot of things really, really started to rub me the wrong way. And the role that I was actually holding during the COVID pandemic was I was the infection preventionist. Um, I had taken this role because I had always held administrative roles as a nurse, or not always, but most recently I had held administrative roles. But I had young children at home, a 1 year old and a 3 year old at the time. So I was trying to take on an administrative role that would hold on a little bit less of responsibilities. And that role did, unless the world got thrust into a pandemic. And so, my role had a little bit less responsibility until the pandemic hit. But my job as being the infection preventionist was to keep all of the patients in the building safe, but also to keep all of the staff members safe. And where I really started to misalign with nursing was that the facility wanted me to lie to the staff members about their safety because they wanted me to make sure that they would keep coming to work. Because that's how they make their money. They need to have staff members there in order to keep getting admissions and in order to keep making money. And I refused. I mean, I absolutely refused to lie to people about their safety. If I lie to them about whether or not it's safe for them to come to work, they get COVID, they bring it home to a sick child or a sick family member, and that person dies because I lied to them. I mean, I just absolutely could not, and I would not. And we really butted heads over this a lot because it was like, this is your job, this is your responsibility. And I don't care. It's not my responsibility to lie, and I won't. And so there was just a lot of headbutting there because it was like a really stressful situation. And it was, this is what you're expected to do. And I just won't do stuff like that. So, there was a lot of times where, after COVID, I knew I got to get out of this. This is not for me. My ethics and my personal, I just do not align with this anymore. This is not where I am meant to be.
Mhm. Yeah, and I agree with that, and thank you so much for standing up, and honoring your truth. I think in a lot of roles, not just to healthcare, but in all roles that we do for a job, we're expected to do things that don't align with ethics, morals, things like that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, all right. So for those who are not familiar with the term of like end of life doula, how would you explain that?
So I like to tell people the easiest way to explain it. Most people know what a birthing doula is. Most people have heard of a birthing doula. A birthing doula helps somebody to safely and comfortably labor into this world. So I always say that a death doula is very similar, an end of life doula is very similar. We just help on the opposite end of life. So as somebody is reaching the final chapter of their life or they're at the end of their life, we help them to safely and comfortably labor out of this world. But that's kind of the short little elevator pitch about what we do. I always like to add that disclaimer that we don't just help people during that final moment. We don't just help people labor out. What we do is much larger than that. We usually help people plan for their best ending. So when somebody gets a terminal diagnosis or somebody knows that they are headed into that, end of life or those final, months of their life, we can help them to plan and prepare for that best ending. And we don't just help the dying individual, we help everyone who's involved so that, it can be a better experience for everyone. We provide emotional support, spiritual support, practical support, logistical support. I like to say that we are the project manager for your final chapter, your most important project, if you will.
Yeah, it's very helpful to have another person in there who does different things. Because I know with the doula, from what I'm understanding, they do have different niches. So not everybody is going to have the same background and skills to bring to doulaship. So it's going to be different for everybody, whatever they bring. I'm more on the spiritual side, and because I have nursing and I don't have the experience in hospice. I don't know how I would get that without going through nursing and all that, but I didn't really want to go in that direction. So I kind of just do like a life review. That's what I'm offering as one of my services. And also because I've had a near death experience, I had a life review through that. I don't know about how your understanding is about the near death experiencers. Um, but so I generally help with one of my services as the life review, and then things like that more on the spiritual aspect of side, and but also helping them to plan their funerals, things like that, that I can do without being a nurse, or anything like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. um, I love to help them create a death plan too. So like, help with their end of life planning, but then also to plan those last days, when they're in that active dying phase, kind of like a birth plan, right? You think of how someone plans that birth plan for like what's going to happen in those moments when you're in labor. Same thing, right? When they're in that active dying phase, what type of music can we play? What type of things can we surround you with, like pictures, or can we project something on the ceiling? Do you want to be by a window so you can get fresh air? Like I am such a nature junkie that you better make sure that I can either see outside and the window, the breeze can get by me. Like I need to be able to somehow make sure that there's nature near me. So I like to make sure to plan all of that too. Who's allowed there? Like that's such an important thing, right? Like those last days of life can be so vulnerable and kind of like an intimate experience. So like who can be a part of that experience? Who do you really really want to be there to be a part of that experience? And is there somebody that you really don't want to be there? Is there somebody who could really genuinely disturb your peace? And a lot of times you can't speak for yourself in those final days and moments. And so, like, if it's really important for you, like, don't let Betty come over because she'll just drive me crazy and I won't be able to say, don't let her here, like, all right, let's plan for it. Betty is not coming over in those final days. So I love to really plan for all of that because, there's all the end of life planning boxes that you have to check, but the death plan is kind of something special that you guys can plan together. You can make a playlist of all their favorite songs, or maybe they have a religion where they want to listen to their religious music, or whatever it is. Maybe they just want like calming instrumental music in the background, or whatever it is. I love to really make that plan too. And to what you said, mentioned about how you're not a nurse and you don't have the hospice background and all of that. So at death doula school, So I'm a death educator, as we mentioned. I'm actually the founder of Death Doula School. So I train people who want to become death doulas. And I actually teach people all about the medical aspects of death and dying. And I teach about hospice, like every single thing that you could ever possibly need to know about hospice. So, it's my idea that all death doulas could really, obviously everybody has their own niche and kind of does what they want to do, but we could all kind of have the same background. I could teach everybody all of the medical aspects about death and dying that you need to know. I could teach you everything that you need to know about hospice so that you can help them choose the best hospice for them. You can help advocate for the best hospice services and all of that stuff. So with the right education, you don't have to necessarily be a nurse. You could still get all of kind of that medical education and background without even being a nurse and having that too. So there is that option and that opportunity out there if you get the right education and the right schooling if you're looking for that type of thing. But I
Right.
also I also love how doulas are able to do their own thing. Like I love that some doulas do lean more spiritual. Some doulas are massage therapists. Some doulas, bring Reiki into it. So I love that the doula role is very much where you can make it whatever you want to make it. It doesn't have to fit into a box, and I love that about it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very freeing to be able to do that and spend more time with the clients because like I know when you're under medical guidelines,
Yes.
there may be restrictions, things like that. You can't do this, and if a whole thing about that. So that's
That's
perfect.
my favorite thing about being a doula, because that was the worst part about being a nurse is that, I'll never forget the first step that I ever experienced as a nurse. It was someone who was dying and they didn't have any family and they were scared. And it was someone that I had gotten to know because it was a patient that I had seen for months and months and months. And he just wanted me to be there with him and sit with him. And as a nurse, I was like, okay, well, this is what I have to do for the day. Like I thought that was my job as a nurse was I got to sit with this guy. He's dying. But the problem was I had 30 other patients. I had 31 patients that day. So like I didn't have any time to sit with him. None. It was like I tried my hardest, but I had 30 people to get medications to get treatments to document on. I mean, I had 20 minutes of time to spend with this guy as he cried and was scared. And I called hospice in and they came in and they spent 1 hour with him out of my 12-hour shift. And it was just like, I mean, it broke my heart because all day long, all I tried to do was like run and see him and hold his hand for 2 minutes before I had to run back and do this. And I just kept saying, like, who's gonna go sit with him? Who's gonna go sit? And there was nobody. And like my little nurse brain just like exploded. Like, well, I don't understand, like this guy is dying and he's crying and he's scared. And then like when I called hospice and they were like, sure, like we'll be there. I was like, oh my gosh, thank God. And then they came in and then they left after an hour. And I was like what? Like that blew my mind too, because that's when you realize like, well, they also have however many patients that they have to go see too, Case, like they can't just sit there with them the whole time too. And it was like, oh my gosh, like this is what it looks like, for people like that. There's got to be somebody else. So, anyways, just it's hard in nursing. It's hard. So I agree. That's the best part about doulas is that we aren't regulated by healthcare. So you get to have one client or two or however many so that you can appropriately manage your schedule so that you're never having to run away from somebody who needs you because you have to go take care of other people.
Mm, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I kind of see some of that playing out in because I'm part-time in assisted living right now, doing more of an admin kind of role. But I see that the caregivers, there's only so many per floor, and there's only so many, they have so many people on that floor, and they have to run, around and try, it's like chaos kind of, and you don't
Yeah.
get enough time, and so it's really interesting to see that take place. But I feel like your background, definitely, even though you're not in the nursing role anymore, it has a lot to bring towards the doula. So that's really great for your background and to bring your skills forward. And maybe having to go through that just to see, where you are now, what you're doing. You had to go through that. Again, thank you for your service as being a nurse.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So why would anyone want to choose a death doula, and how would they choose one?
Why would anyone want to choose death doula? I always say that when you work with a death doula, in addition to hospice, working with the two of them together, you just get a higher level of care than working with just hospice alone. So it's like if you work with, hospice, you're getting this level of care, but if you work with both of us, you're getting this level of care. So it's just covering yourself a little bit more at the end of life, just getting a better end of life experience, but not only for yourself, for your loved ones. And so this is kind of what I really like to stress for people. Most people who are dying, they're biggest concern is their people. How are their people going to handle this? Because once you are gone, you can't do anything to help your people anymore. And so I think that that's almost one of the biggest benefits of a death doula is that, we get to know you, the dying individual, but we also get to know your loved ones. And then we get to help your loved ones through your death so that they're not alone and there's somebody there, to help them through this. And I think that that really truly is one of the biggest benefits is that we can change the way people experience death. So once the dying individual is gone, we can change the way the loved ones actually experience their death. So instead of them looking back on, mom's death, dad's death, whoever's death, and thinking it was horrible and it was so stressful and it was so sad, of course they're going to look back of it and think that it was sad because it's always sad losing someone you love, but they might be able to look back at it with positive memories too. It was really sad, but we had this beautiful death plan. And in her last days of life, we had this death doula and, we played this beautiful music and we held her hands and we took pictures with her. And, they might be able to have really fond memories of it too, instead of really, negative, scary, fearful memories. So I think that's the benefit of working with a death doula. And how can you work with a death doula? Or how can you find a death doula? My best advice, and this might sound a little hokey, but my best advice is to honestly Google it. Google death doula in your area. The majority of us have our businesses listed on Google. Right now, there is like 100 different death doula directories. So it's really hard to say, like, oh, go to this directory and look up a death doula, because there's just like 100 different ones. And that's really complicated and confusing. There's not one directory that lists all of the death doulas. Except Google. So if you go to Google, the majority of us have our businesses listed there. Now, if you happen to be a death doula and you're listening and you don't have your business listed on Google, please do me a favor and go list your business on Google because I tell everybody to search for death doulas on Google. So go on Google, list your business on there. It's completely free to list your business on Google. And that way, whenever somebody needs a death doula, they can just search death doula near me and it'll pull up all of the death doulas, nearest to you. That's my best advice.
Yeah, it's very good advice. Because yeah, I know, and it can be, I mean, if there's a lot in that area, it can be kind of hard, just like picking a doctor, it's like, which one do I go to? What are they
Right.
going to bring? And it's just doing the research. But a lot of people I feel don't really know yet about the deaf doula. And although it's like an emerging role that, a lot of people are being called to right now, there it's a great way to get to find one in your area is by Googling. So thank you. Yeah. Now, how has the end of life and doula and educator changed your life?
Oh, it has changed my life in so many ways. But two of the most important ways are this. First of all, when I was a nurse, as you know, or when I was working as a nurse, of course, I am still a nurse. I'll always be a nurse at heart. Um, Nurses work really, really crazy schedules, right? So my schedule was always so busy and so packed. And the schedule of a nurse, what's the word? It's not easy to fit anything else in there, right? Like they give you this schedule and that is your schedule and they don't care. They don't care if you have a doctor's appointment or if your kid has a concert in the middle of the day. Like there's no leaving your shift in the middle of the day to run out and run back, anything like that. Like nursing schedules are really, really difficult. And so it was always really hard for me to try to fit my life in between my nursing schedule. It was always so hard to do that, trying to fit in doctor's appointments for myself or doctor's appointments for the kids or kids' extracurricular activities, things like that. Well, now that I'm an end of life doula and I own my own business, something that's really important for me is that I fit my work into my life schedule instead. So now I have this schedule where I fill out my life things instead, and I make my work fit in between my life stuff. And that has been so incredibly freeing. I will absolutely never go back to doing it the other way around. My life comes first. My life is more important. And that has been a change that I will never go back from or go back to. And the reason that I did this is because working with people in such a close and important way as they're dying at the end of their life, you hear people tell you their regrets all the time. And the regrets that people always have is that I worked my entire life away. All I did was work, and I never put focus on the important things like my family or the things that I wanted to do. I didn't travel. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I should have spent more time with my kids. I should have done this. I should have done that. And hearing this over and over and over again, that changed me because that will not be me. I will not be sitting on my deathbed saying I gave my entire life away to a job that didn't appreciate me. And so that changed me and that helped me to change my life in that I now schedule my work around my life and the important things because I'm going to live my life for me, for myself so that when I'm sitting on my deathbed, I can sit there and think about all of the amazing things that I did with my life and how I fit my work into my life schedule instead of trying to squeeze little bits of life into my work schedule, you know? So those are kind of the two biggest things that working with people at the end of life have really taught me that, my life is most important. I'm here to live my life, and that when I'm sitting on my deathbed, I don't want to have a whole list of regrets to go through. I want to have a whole list of memories to go through instead.
Yeah, that is important. And also like self-care, because if you're constantly at work and it can be very stressful. We're not taking care of ourselves sometimes. And we don't have time, like you said, to go to the doctors. And if you don't have sick time, you can't take a day off. And it's just chaotic, having a job. So I understand that. Now, with some of your services as a deaf doula, what would your life review look like? Just in a short blurb on that? Like how do you play out the life review?
Um, Honestly, I don't really have like a whole like I don't have a system about it. I like to just kind of sit down and talk with them because each person is different and the way that they're going to kind of get those things out is going to be different. My favorite question and my favorite way to really get people to open up is just to say, what is top of mind for you today? So that's kind of how I do things. I will schedule an appointment with my client. I have virtual clients. So I have clients that are across the whole country. Since I have such a big social media following, I get a lot of clients from social media who really want to work with me personally. So I have virtual clients that we'll work with, and then I have local clients where I'll go sit with them. But, we schedule our meetings, and the first thing I say is, what's top of mind for you today? And that usually leads to either something that is bothering them. Well, honestly, I've been thinking about this, and, this is really struggling with me, or it leads to a memory. I was thinking about the time that I took the kids to the beach vacation, and oh my gosh, we had so much fun. And either one of those two things is great for me. Whatever's bothering you, we're going to talk through it. Let's talk through whatever's bothering you. Or if you're thinking about that vacation, absolutely tell me more about that vacation. And then I'm just going to keep probing and asking more questions as you go. Where did you go? You were in Florida. What was the sand like? Did the kids have so much fun? How old were they? Oh my gosh, tell me more about that. Did you guys get ice cream? So I don't have like a set system that I do. I just love that kind of what's top of mind for you question. And then I really just roll with it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's a great way to go into it and let them be open to sharing, if they feel like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now with the guided imagery, I noticed you do that. Is that how and when do you take do that? Is it like more where they're transitioning, or is it like just a meditative if they're in pain, or how does that play in for you?
It's kind of a we feel it out as we go thing. Not everybody's into the guided imagery. It's definitely, you have to feel out the client to feel out if they're into that. Um, Females are definitely more into the guided imagery. I've tried to do it with males before, and they're like, I don't know what this is, but I'm not here for this." So definitely a female will pick up on guided imagery more than a male most of the time, I've found. Um, and I don't really, I just, when we're talking, I can kind of feel if they're stressed out or if they're really kind of living in the moment. Like, for instance, the beach vacation that I just kind of brought up when I had a client who was kind of reliving this beach vacation. Like, I kind of had her close her eyes and then I brought her back to that beach vacation. Like, all right, let's close your eyes. Can you, like, what did it smell like there? Can you tell me, like, what did the sand feel like under your feet? And like almost really, guided her back to that exact moment and brought her back there and had her telling me everything about it. Could you feel, the mist from the waves like really touching your skin? And, so just finding the right moment when it feels like it's right to kind of guide them back through something like that where it might be really calming for them. I've done it in moments of stress, like when I've had somebody seem like they're really stressed out, like, all right, well, let's give this a shot and see how this might feel. I had one client in particular who she had what I don't know if this is a real thing, but I made this up. I kept calling it hospital PTSD because she had a lot of just bad experiences in the hospital. And so I would come over and ask, "What's top of mind for you today?" And she would just start freaking out about, "I'm so nervous that something's going to happen and I'm going to end up back in the hospital. And what if this, and what if this, and what if this?" And it was like she had PTSD about being in the hospital. And so, these moments I would be like, "Okay, let's try something. Let's pull you out of this and let's go somewhere else." And she was from British Columbia. So she had these, happy places from up there. And so I would take her to her happy place and kind of pull her out of her stressful moments of, nervousness and things like that. So, again, I just kind of use it whenever I feel like it might be helpful.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I think that can be possible, a hospital PTSD, if they've seen family members go through it, or, it's something that they're concerned is going to happen to them or something like that. But and then with her having bad experience. With the Virgil planning, so why is that important for people to do that if they don't know anything about it, or what would you say about the Virgil planning?
So, vigil planning, so bedside vigil, like this is the time when somebody is in the active dying phase, right? And the active dying phase is the last days of life. It can last 3 to 14 days. Each person is different. So, however long this active dying phase is going to last is going to be different depending on the person. During this active dying phase, usually the person themselves, they are unable to communicate for the most part. There might be like, small moments of awakeness where maybe they can answer a yes or no question, but for the most part, people cannot communicate during the active dying phase. And so I really like to get people thinking about that before they get to that point, because a lot of times people won't talk to someone about, like, listen, this is what the last days of your life are going to look like, and you're not going to be able to communicate with us. And so if you don't really tell somebody that, they have absolutely no idea that, for the last 3 to 14 days of your life, you won't be able to communicate with anybody. And also, you're not usually able to move much at all during that time. Those last days of life are pretty much spent in a very, very, very deep slumber, which is great. That's what we want to see is a very deep sleep. That means that you're comfortable. So, what can we do in those moments to make you the most comfortable you could possibly think of? You're not going to be able to tell me in those moments. So, I want you to think about it now, and getting people to think about those things beforehand, because you have no idea. If I wouldn't have told you that that's what those last days of life are going to look like, you would have no idea. And oftentimes, nobody will tell you that. They'll just let you head into those last days of life, and that's going to happen to you. And it is what it is. But you're not really ever going to know that that's what that's going to look like unless somebody's really going to paint that picture for you. So I love to be able to paint that picture of here's what this is going to look like. And I want to know, how can I make it just the most beautiful experience that you can imagine, so that when you can't communicate with me at all, I know exactly what to do to make this incredible. Windows open, windows closed. Do you hate harsh lights? Do we need to make sure that we keep all of the above lights off? Absolutely. I had one client who there was a book. like a really, really old book that she had that her grandma used to read to her mom, and then her mom used to read to her when she was a kid. And it was like this really, really old book. So it was so cool because, like, who doesn't love a really old book that's been passed down through the generations? And so the more we talked about it, she was like, now that I think about it, because she was always hoping, of course, that her mom would come back and get her. Because that's the other thing I love to tell people about is, who's going to come get you? Like, I believe someone's coming to get you. So who is it? Who do you want to come get you? I believe they'll be there. Don't be surprised if you see them. So she was like, the more that I think about it, if my mom does come to get me, she would love it if you were reading this book to me. Heck yeah. So now that's part of the plan. I'm sitting there reading stories out of this book to her. So, anyways, just that this is what bedside vigil's like. Each vigil can be different because I like to put it in your hands. What do you want your vigil to look like? You tell me so I can make sure that it looks like whatever the heck you want it to look like. Do you want me holding your hand, or are you not a touchy person and you're like, keep your hands off me, don't touch me, and let me labor out in peace? Or are you super touchy? I mean, I had one client who was like, nothing brings me peace more than people just like rubbing my head. And so I would sit there and rub her head. I rubbed her head until the second she took her last breath. And whatever makes you happy, you tell me, and I'm going to make sure that I do it and we do it. And then also, I pay really close attention to the family at this time too, because the dying individual, they're really comfortable, usually, hopefully, that's the goal. So they don't need so much from you other than just to kind of be there and to give them love and to make sure everything's happening like it's supposed to. But the family, the loved ones, they're going to spend 3 to 14 days watching this person that they love slowly shut down and slowly die. And while I've seen that hundreds and hundreds of times, so it's not really alarming for me, it's really hard for people to watch the body of somebody that they love slowly shut down and die. The body declines in such a way that it can look a little scary and it can sound a little scary. And so it gets really hard. And especially if it takes a long time, if it takes 14 days, that gets so exhausting for the loved ones to watch somebody struggle to breathe for 14 days. I mean, you're exhausted. And by the end of it, you start wanting them to die. And what a confusing feeling for you to want somebody that you love endlessly to die. And that really starts to mess with people so much. How could I want them to die? I love them. I don't want them to leave. But also, you don't want to look at this anymore. You don't want to look at this person who looks like a skeleton and is struggling to breathe. So really being there to support them in a way that they had no idea they were ever going to need from you. And then also, I love to just keep up like random little daily habits. So, for instance, I have one client who she loved fresh flowers. And so every day, well, when she was able to walk, every day she would go to the store and get her own fresh flowers and put them on the table in front of her. Well, then she got a little weaker, so she started getting them delivered every day. Well, then she entered the active dying phase, so that wasn't happening anymore. So you bet your bottom dollar that every single day I was bringing fresh flowers to her house and putting them at the bottom of her table. She had no idea, or maybe she did have an idea. I don't know. But, it's not like she was saying, thank you so much for these flowers, but her kids, they were noticing every day, wait a minute, mom's got fresh flowers here, so little things like that. I had another client who was Catholic and she loved holy water. She would spray holy water on herself like perfume. And then she would also spray it on her wounds because she was convinced that it would heal her wounds. Well, when she entered the active dying phase, obviously she wasn't spraying her holy water perfume on. And so I was there every single day, spraying her holy water perfume on her. And she had a few bruises on her arms. And so I would say, don't worry, I got you. And I would spray her holy water on any bruise that she had, you know, just because I knew that she would love it. If she was able to respond to me, she would say, Kacie, thank you so much. So I love to just keep up little things like that. Those are my bedside vigil tips and tricks for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yep. And that's so important because whatever you can do to make them feel comfortable and loved and make it a good experience for them. A lot of people, so many people look at it as like a negative thing. And with the assisted living, I don't know how many people actually get to do that. And I'm of course like in the administrative office receptionist role. Um, but yeah, we just get the notification that they've passed, and I don't know that they've actually done any planning or anything like that. And they just, okay, they're gone. They're here one day and gone the next.
Yeah, so now I worked in long-term cares and assisted livings and all of those things for a long time, and it's so hard in those types of situations because you know, there's just not much around them dying. When you work in a long-term care facility, you get to know, or assisted living, you get to know these residents for months or years, and then they die, and it's like, hurry up, get their room cleaned out because somebody else needs that room. And that's just it. They're just gone. Sometimes they'll do like a little memorial once a month to memorialize all of the residents who have died. But that's just really it. It's just kind of like a quick turnover of people. And I always found that to be so sad, not only for the other residents who live there because they get to know them. I mean, that's their friends, they've gotten to know them for however long they've lived there. But also for the staff, because oftentimes the staff kind of becomes like family to those residents, and then they die, and there usually is not much vigil planning or anything like that. And not even much recognition of the fact like, hey, this person died. It's just like, hey, they died, let's get their room cleaned up so someone else can get in there. And you just kind of move on with it, like a life wasn't just lost. Sometimes it feels just a little bit like money, as opposed to like real humans.
Right. Yep. And it's unfortunate. And maybe someday it would be nice to have them where they actually integrate that as part of, them being there, to educate them, on certain situations. And I love the
Right.
whole natural death because I just seen a video of somebody was talking about that. And they used the example, like you said, there's natural childbirth, there's also natural death. And maybe a lot of people don't know about that, because they're in hospice, they don't know they can be at home. They don't know that they can go through VSED or MAID or anything like that. So what are your thoughts on those natural methods like VSED and MAID?
So I've worked with patients who have chosen VSED before. So VSED is voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. It's legal in all 50 states. Everybody is allowed to choose VSED. I find that usually when people choose VSED, it's because, or at least my experience with people who have chosen VSED, it's because they've fought an illness for a really long time. Usually like cancer, they've done chemo, they've done radiation, it's gone away, it's come back. They've done chemo, they've done radiation, it's gone away, it's come back. I mean, they've fought this for years and years and years. And then finally they just get so tired. And it's just, I'm so sick of doing this. And I just don't want to do this anymore. Um, and so they just kind of stop. And usually it's my experience that a lot of times they've already lost that appetite where like they haven't been hungry for a long time anyway, but they've kind of been forcing themselves to eat because their loved ones don't want them to die. So everyone's like, hey, you got to eat breakfast. Hey, you got to eat lunch. And so they're like, okay, like forcing the food down. And they kind of just get to a point where they're like, I think my body's over this and I think I'm over this too. And I'm going to stop. Um, so, I mean, I'm absolutely 100% an advocate of bodily autonomy, and it's your body, your choice, and in all stages of life. So, even at the end of life, if you choose VSED, if you choose medical aid in dying, absolutely. Um, Medical aid in dying is legal in 12 states now, 11 or 12 states. I can't remember which one it is. Unfortunately for me, I'm in Ohio. It's not legal in my state. So I have not had the luck of working with somebody who's chosen medical aid in dying. So I am absolutely an advocate for it. I would love to work with somebody who has chosen that. But I have not had the luck of working with somebody who's chosen that, yet, but I'm sure I will in the future.
Perfect. Um, and do you go to people's homes, or is it more in like a hospice setting or something like that? Do you go to, or do you do personal visits at home?
So most of my visits are at home. Where I'm at here, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. Most people receive hospice in the home. There are only a few, and by a few I mean like two or three inpatient hospice facilities here in my area, but they're very small, like maybe 20, 25 beds. So, I mean, it's almost impossible for someone to even get into the inpatient hospice facilities. You have to kind of check a whole lot of boxes to really make it into one of those places. So, the majority of people, do die at home with hospice services here at home. So, yep, all of my clients that I've worked with have been at home. I have had one client who died in the hospital. Um, that's because she was not even on hospice yet. I had started working with her. She'd gotten a terminal diagnosis, but she was still receiving like palliative chemo treatments. And so we hadn't even signed her onto hospice yet, but she just kind of had some emergency situation that happened. We had to call 911. She went into the hospital and never ended up making it out of the hospital. So, I have worked with patients, in the hospital before, but for the most part, it's usually just working with them at home and helping them to arrange hospice services at home. I actually usually start working with people before they have signed on to hospice. So, kind of how you mentioned people have different niches. I didn't purposefully niche myself down to this, but this is just the clients who happen to find me typically end up being people who've had a cancer diagnosis. Younger. My clients have mostly been between the ages of 20 and 60. They've received a cancer diagnosis and they call me right away before they're even hospice appropriate. So a lot of times they're still receiving palliative treatments or some type of treatment to where, we're not ready for hospice yet, but let's get the death doula on board. Let's start working on end of life planning. Let's start figuring some things out. So I usually work with my clients for many months. And then what I help them do is to arrange hospice services when we get there, when we have, gotten to the point where like now palliative treatments are no longer working or whatever the situation may be, now, okay, it looks like it's time to arrange hospice services. I can actually help them do that. Most people don't realize that in most areas, however, it's not everywhere, but in most areas, there are several different hospice companies that you can choose from. So when you get that diagnosis from your doctor, like, hey, there's not really anything else we can do, it's time for you to call hospice, your doctor will give you a referral for hospice and they'll give you the name of, one hospice company, but there's usually tons of other hospice companies in the area. So you don't just want to go with that one hospice company that your doctor gave you. You can interview that hospice company for sure. You always want to interview that one, but you want to interview more than that one. Everything's about money when it comes to to healthcare. So that doctor is giving you the referral of a hospice company that has paid the most money to get that doctor to give you that referral, and not necessarily from your doctor personally. It's all about corporate. You know what I mean? So here in my area, most doctors work for the Cleveland Clinic because I'm in Cleveland. So it's all about what hospices have partnered with the corporate hospital in the area, how much they've paid to get that referral to be given out. So it's all about a money exchange. You don't want the hospice who's paid the most money. You want the hospice who's going to give you the best care. That's what you're looking for here. So I always recommend interviewing at least three hospice companies. And then I always give my clients a list of questions. Here are 5 questions I want you to ask these hospice companies in order to determine which one is going to give you the best care. And oftentimes I sit through those hospice interviews with them. So we as a team are going to help determine that hospice is definitely the best hospice. But also when I'm working with people locally, like I'm connected with all of these hospices locally. So like I know which ones are the best and I have them on speed dial. So like I can just give them a ringy ding real quick and we can get you signed up on hospice services with the best hospices in the area, pretty quickly. So, it's real easy to kind of get those things moving, but I think that it's important for death doulas to know hospice in and out because we can really help in that way. People don't know hospice just like they don't know death because hospice is associated with death. So we've never been educated about hospice. People wait until the last minute to bring on hospice, but that's foolish. Hospice can help with so many things. And so if death doulas are educated about hospice and everything that they do, then we can be their biggest advocate and we can be educating our clients. Hey, it's time. Let's bring them on. They can help us get oxygen. We can get a hospital bed. They can get us wheelchairs and walkers and briefs. They can get you the medicine for the anxiety and the pain that you're having. They can get you all of these things that you need. There's no need to wait until the last few days of your life. If your doctor gave you that referral, let's go ahead and start interviewing them now.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I like that approach, getting and networking with all the different hospices and then sitting with the client and helping them to choose that. I really like that option, and how to implement that, with your services. So kind of want to go a little bit on what maybe people would call the woo-woo or the spiritual side of everything. So from your perspective, what happens energetically, spiritually when somebody's heading into the last days?
Oh, I love this. I love going this way. Okay, so I believe that in the active dying phase, people are like a little bit here and a little bit there. Like I don't know what happens, when we transition on. But I believe that in those last days of life, we're kind of a little bit between both worlds, whatever the next one is and whatever's here. And so I told you that I like to keep up with daily habits as if, the person is still here. And that's because I believe that they're floating above us, watching us. And so even though they can't necessarily say like, "Hey, thank you so much for putting my holy water on me," I believe that they're watching me do everything just like they normally would be watching me. And you've heard from people who have near-death experiences, they say over and over again, it was like I was hovering above my body, watching what was going on beneath me. I always think, you've heard that so many times. What if they are hovering above me, watching what's going on? I'm just going to act accordingly, just in case they are hovering above me, watching what's going on beneath. I'm just going to act accordingly, just like I would always act, just in case they are, so that they feel good, so that they feel comfortable and they feel safe. Like, oh, good. Kacie is just acting like she's always acted. Nothing's off, nothing's weird. So that's how I do. That's what I believe. That's how I feel. And I feel like that's what would make them the most comfortable is if I just sit there chit-chatting with them. And I'm a jokester. I'm always laughing and joking. So I'll be cracking jokes with them. And I don't know, because I believe that they're just kind of watching over us and everything that's happening. So yeah, that's kind of what I think's happening in those last moments.
Yeah, yeah, and you do hear that, a lot of people having out of body experiences, like when they're in traumatic experiences in the operating room, they're just kind of hovering there, so yeah, definitely. Awesome. So how would you approach conversations about the afterlife mystery and unknown with clients and families? Have you approached that with them or let them do it? How do you go about that?
I definitely talk about it all the time. So there's a few things I always say. I always tell people that, obviously I have absolutely no idea what happens in the afterlife and I will never claim to. So, you know, I like to throw that out there. I do believe that we are all energy and energy never dies, it only changes. So I do believe that our energy truly does not ever die, it just changes. And so that's why I am not terribly sad or overcome with horrible grief when my clients die, because that word die is, you know, interesting to me. I don't really believe that they died. I just believe that they changed into something else. And in my eyes, I believe that whatever they've changed into has to be beautiful. Whatever goes on to the next world, I believe that is beautiful. Um, so that's kind of my little spiel for whatever is after this. I do also tell my clients all of the time that I love to lean into the spiritual and the woo woo, and I think that it's great if they do too. So I tell them that, you know, I have clients who almost always see lost loved ones, whether that be a person or a pet. And so if you are seeing those things, first of all, don't you dare not tell me. You better tell me because I want to know about it. I want to know every single spiritual experience that you have. So please tell me. So they always tell me their spiritual experiences. And then the other thing that I always tell them is I don't have any idea what happens when you transition and when you go on to the other side. But if you can come back and find me, do it. Come back and find me and let me know that you're here and leave me little signs and watch over me and make sure that I'm safe. And I tell them that all the time. I open it and I'm welcome to it and I won't be scared. And I do, I believe that they come back for me and that they leave me little signs all the time. So those are my little spiritual woo woo things that I love to tell them all the time.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you had any experiences. I know some people say that, they've had people come back and, it's almost like they're giving them that image or that feeling of what the other side is like. And they do tend to share, if people are open to the messages or signs that they're given. So,
I can tell you a few of my signs. I haven't had anything crazy. Like I don't see like apparitions or anything like that. But I had one client who she was younger when she died, and the only family or only person that she had that she left behind was her son, who was 21. And she died right around Thanksgiving. And she came to me the night that she died in my dream. And she said to me, my son has nowhere to go for Thanksgiving. And I said, okay. And she said, my son has nowhere to go for Thanksgiving. And I said, okay. And that was it. And she left. And I woke up and I texted him and I said, would you like to come have Thanksgiving with my family? And he said, I absolutely would love that. And so I had him over for Thanksgiving with my family and it was really nice and he really enjoyed it. And so I don't know. I believe that that was her saying, my son needs to come spend Thanksgiving with you. He's alone. He lost his mother. Like, please don't, please don't leave him. I don't know if that was, maybe it was her. Maybe it was just my brain being like, hey, you got to invite this kid. I don't know. But I believe it was her being like, don't leave my baby alone on Thanksgiving. Um, Another sign that I believe I had recently, one of my most recent clients who passed, she was also a friend who I had met in the business world. And we had actually known each other for probably 2 years before I started working with her as her doula. Um, so, we knew each other in kind of like a businessy way too. Like she knew how important it is to grow a business and all of that stuff. And so a lot of our talking was always her, like, what's new with your business? What are you doing with your business? So I was going to give a speech and she knew that this was coming up, like it's something that we had been talking about. Well, she ended up, dying a couple weeks before my speech. And so I was upstairs one day and I was kind of picking out my clothes and trying to figure out what to wear. And I was talking out loud, which I do often. And I just kind of was like, I don't know what shoes I'm going to wear with this outfit and whatever, whatever. Um, and I went downstairs and I went to bed for the night. And then the next morning, I went upstairs where my clothes are to kind of pack my suitcase. And right at the top of the steps, there was a set of shoes that matched the outfit that I was looking to wear, just sitting there, almost like somebody had picked out these shoes and set them right at the top of the steps. And I mean, they were set there in such a fashion that I mean, it was like somebody had grabbed these shoes and put them there, and nobody from my family goes upstairs. That's like my dressing room, like my closet. Nobody had been up there. I mean, nobody. It was like I was the last one up and then the first one up there. And I swear, I feel like it was her because I had told her to come back and find me if she could. And she had been known I was going on this speech. We had been talking about it for the longest time. And I just feel like she was there with me when I was trying to pick out my outfit. And she found these shoes that really matched. And she was like, Case, I want you to wear these shoes to your speech. Like they'll look great. So anyways, again, just a silly little thing. It could have been any type of coincidence, but in my mind, it was her. And she helped me pick out the shoes for my speech that I did wear, by the way. And my speech went fantastic. So just
that,
little signs.
that's beautiful. Love that story. And it can also help with great memories too, people passing when we have that, and then they can help out from the side. So what practices and rituals have you found to be the most powerful? And so when you're helping to bring peace to people in the dying process, so scents or certain things? You already mentioned about like rubbing the head and things like that. Is there any certain rituals or anything like that?
So I don't really have any rituals, but there are like two things that I can mention. First of all, music. So hearing is the last thing to go, right? And music, I have actually like watched music calm somebody's body down. So important if you get the chance to learn what type of music they like. I can't stress how important that how important that is. I know it sounds kind of silly to like learn what type of music someone likes, and how could that really be so important in the grand scheme of death? But I swear if you're sitting with somebody, as they're laboring out of life, if you know that Frank Sinatra is just their absolute favorite and you can throw Frank Sinatra on and watch their body kind of like release and calm, you'll be so happy that you know that. So just really important to focus in and hone in on like what is their favorite type of music. But I've also sat with people before, I had a client where um, the husband called me and she was already in the active dying phase and she had had a traumatic brain injury. And so I never got a chance to know her at all. And so, I sat with her for her last couple weeks of life, but, I knew absolutely nothing about her. And so it was a little harder. I love to get to know my clients on such a deep level. So I did play music for her all the time, but it was kind of like trying to find which music maybe she would like the best. Definitely I could ask her husband too, but without knowing her on a level that I would know most people. So always music. Try to find the kind of music that you think could. This particular lady was so uncomfortable and hospice had a really hard time finding the right meds to keep her comfortable. And I was able to put on something that she liked one day and she was uncomfortable like this. And when I put on music that she liked, I mean, I just watched her kind of lean back and stop shaking and actually get comfortable. And it's I felt like she felt that music in her soul. It calmed her down more than the Ativan that the nurse just gave her. It made me so happy. And then also, I'm really big on touch. So I've never been trained in Reiki, but I do believe in energy and passing energy to people and calming energy and whatever it is. And so I always have this belief that I can pass energy through my palms. I tell my kids that I can pass them love through my palms. And so I love to just lay my hands on people in any way, even if it's just like this, let me just put my hand on you. And I'll even say, like, do you feel that? Like, I'm giving you love right now through my palm. I'm giving you love through my palm into your arm. It's nice and calming. So those are two of the things that I love to do is music and just some light touch. But I am also careful because some people don't like to be touched. So if I touch somebody and they're kind of like, you know, moving in such a way like get off me. Okay, okay. This is not a they're not a touchy person. I get it. I get it. Not everybody is, but I won't do the touching with this person. Um hand holding, arm touching, or even just a hand on the leg sometimes too. And then I told you before, I'm so big on nature. So the woman that I mentioned who I never really got to know, she was in a long-term care facility and just not dying a comfortable death by any means. So I was trying every single thing that I could do to get her comfortable, and the touch really helped, and the music really helped. We were in a long-term care facility. The smell was not pleasant, I would say. So I took it upon myself to hit the brakes on that bed and I shifted her bed over by the window and I opened that blind and I opened that window and this breeze came in and it happened to be a beautiful day outside, thank goodness. Um, and she had thankfully a nice view of just kind of like trees and the wind was blowing through some like tall grass and she opened her eyes a little bit and I could see that she really got some comfort from that too. So these are just things that I try my hardest to focus on, are like the senses, right? Touch, feel, smell, um, things like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, nature has a lot of healing effects, and it's interesting because I've done some reading on some things where in the past they used to incorporate nature in the healing, and nowadays they just are in establishments, buildings, things like that. So that is definitely a nice approach where you're opening the windows and letting nature in. So I love that. Yeah. Um, so with being in the death doula role, how do you see that changing our culture, our relationships with death? Do you see that being more a positive thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I really do think that death doulas are at the forefront of changing death care. I don't think that we are, the only ones doing it. I think that death care is changing as a whole in so many different ways, but death doulas are a part of that. Even the funeral industry is, completely changing. Everything used to be just this one way, and now everybody's kind of realizing we don't have to do everything just this one way. There's all these different ways that we can do things, and we can give ourselves these different options now. So I really think that one of the biggest ways that death doulas are impacting death care is that we are out here educating everybody. I mean, look at what you're doing. You have this whole YouTube channel where you're like, hey, listen, everybody, let me educate you about life, about death doulas. And there's all these people out here listening. Same thing with like my social media. I started my social media 3 years ago now, and I had a business coach, and I had told her, like, I think I'm going to start a TikTok where I'm going to like talk about my death doula stuff. And she was like, do not do that. Nobody is going to be into that. Nobody on TikTok's going to want to hear about death. Like, I don't think you should do that. And I almost listened. I was almost like, oh, she's really good. Like, she knows what she's doing. But I did it anyway. And people were very interested to learn about what I was saying. And it just kept feeding, like, okay, I got 50 likes on this video. There are 50 people out there that liked what I had to say. And I post another one, and that one got 100 likes. And then I got 1,000 likes. Like, that's crazy. People want to know about end of life medication and about the active dying phase. And it's like the more we start talking about it, the more people want to hear about it. And then there's another death doula and another death doula and another death doula. So I think that we are changing the narrative. Death, it doesn't have to be scary. It's a part of life. It's going to happen to every single one of us. So why should it be something that we shouldn't talk about? It should be something that every single one of us should talk about. It's going to happen to all of us. We can't just be quiet about it. So I love that about death doulas, that we are out here doing the darn thing, teaching people about it. We're all going to die. It's time to learn. Let's stop being so quiet about it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I kind of see it being a positive thing, changing perspective around it. And a lot of it is education. And part of why I'm doing what I'm doing, talking to other doulas, just to have the conversation to help educate. And then also for my own, learning and evolution in the process of, my services and what I'm doing to bring out. And I did go to your channels, your YouTube, and yeah, you did get a lot more on what was it, the TikTok?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I seen on the YouTube, it seems like that took off more. People are interested in it, so
Yeah, my TikTok took off first. But now my Instagram and my Facebook have way more followers. I actually don't have much on YouTube. YouTube, I don't get as many. I do post on YouTube, but I don't get as many followers or as many people interested on YouTube. But between Facebook and Instagram, I've got over 100 and something thousand followers. So people are definitely interested.
yeah, yeah. And we can only just keep talking about it and sharing the knowledge. And so what advice would you give to someone who feels called to the path of doulaship?
Well, the first advice I would give you is to check out Death Doula School, because I would love to teach you. But if you have the calling and you feel like you want to be a death doula, just check out which death doula training feels right for you. There's a lot of death doula trainings out there. So just make sure that you choose the one that feels right for you. There's a lot of different ones, and they offer different things. And you want to make sure that you find one that's comprehensive, one that's going to give you support and guidance and give you all the things that you need to succeed.
Perfect. And so is there anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to share?
I don't know. I think we pretty much hit on everything. So other than that, I just, like I said, if anyone's interested in becoming a death doula, I would love to talk to you and teach you a little bit more. At Death Doula School, we have a really comprehensive curriculum. It's a little more comprehensive than the majority of the programs out there. We teach all about what is a death doula and what a death doula does, but we also teach about the medical aspects of death and dying, how to work alongside with hospice, everything that hospice does. We teach all about long-term care facilities, assisted living facilities, all about self-care and how to take care of yourself and draw boundaries while working in this hard work. We have guest speakers, so you learn from a lot of important people in the end of life realm, but it also includes a lot of guidance and mentorship and support. And then also, most importantly, Death Doula School includes business training because as a death doula, in order to be successful, you actually have to open your own business. There isn't really anybody out there hiring death doulas right now. So that's where a lot of the death doula training programs are lacking. They teach you how to be a death doula, but they don't really teach you what to do with that information or how to be successful or how to make money with it. So at Des Doula School, we kind of teach you how to hit the ground running and how to make money and give you all of the tools that you need to succeed. So if anyone's interested, please let me know. Also, if you are on social media, you can find me at Death Doula Kacie, and it's Kacie, and I'm on all of the social platforms. So feel free to reach out. You can shoot me a DM, and I'm pretty responsive. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that and for the enlightened conversation. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about you and me. We're not the one and only. It's going to happen to everybody. Yeah, baby. Say it isn't so, baby. It's the truth, don't you know, baby? We're all consciousness, living out our reason in a world of endless stories. Said from the beginning, we race to the finish as we face the harsh reality. We don't remember where we come from or where we're going. But don't you worry, baby.